Hello everybody, once again this is Lehman Crafton, aka Zor Valachan, Less Than Guru, and as you might have noticed, I have a little background that I figured out when I was downloading a program to cancel out noise with my graphic card. It actually was a different program than what I thought it would be, and it also had a little camera feature, so we'll see how this is. If you like it, leave a comment if you hate it, because I look kind of 80s-ish, cut out green screen type thing. Let me know that as well. But I decided to post, well, let me point to the wrong way, or the right way. This guy here is who, his reality is what we're going to be talking about. And as you can see, Mars, he even got in my lap before the video started. He heard me moving things around and decided that he wanted to participate. So today will be my continuing setting of the original Torg, an invading realm. I think it was 2 videos ago, I kind of did a couple of realities that weren't actual invading realities, but just realities that might happen on Torg, the original game. And so today we are going to be dealing with the Cyberpapacy, and this guy here is the Cyberpope, Cyberpope Jean Malraux I. And the concept of the Cyberpapacy in original Torg is pretty interesting, because it did not start off as the actual Cyberpapacy. It started off as what was known as the False Papacy. And if you watched my previous video on Isle and Uthorian, I told you that Uthorian worked in alignments with another High Lord, and this, and I'm pointing the wrong way because left is right and right is left, but this guy here is the ally that Uthorian had. So they had kind of a little bromance going on, where the tech of the time, as you can see, he cybered out, so that's high tech, but when he was with the reality of the False Papacy, he wasn't. He was tech 15, just right along with Uthorian, and his magic is a 10, so it's much less than Uthorian's, but still able to have spells done and demons being summoned and things like that, which was somewhat important for him, which I'll explain. So we have tech of 15, we have magic of 10, there is a spirit of 14, so miracles and such are able to be called upon by the cyber priests or the false papacy priests. And then social is, and actually let me check, I believe it's 18 also, so it was very close in that regard to, yes, 18. And my books kind of disappear. So when I'm holding up the Cyberpapacy book, it is, you might see when I hold it more flat, it tends to work. It's the same as this picture. So the False Papacy was very Isle-ish in most of the axioms, and they were very much an anti-tech realm with the False Papacy. And when they would invade cosms that had tech, basically they would send their agents there first, and as I mentioned in the settings video, the agents would go there and kind of start giving the people in the cosm kind of the idea of the invading cosm. They didn't say, oh, an invading cosm's coming, but they would start saying things to kind of get people thinking and make them kind of prepare them to have their reality change. So they accepted the invading reality as being real and were able to transform easy. When transform, your possibility energy is sucked away by the darkness device, so it was easier to prep the cosm that you were invading. So they would come in and they would say, like, technology is bad, it's evil, it's the devil's work. And they would have, instead of like book burning, that type of thing, they'd have tech burning, and they had big piles of tech and burn it all. And then when the false papacy would come in and invade, then the axioms would make all that technology not working. So they could say, see, we were right. Now God's coming down and God is saying that tech is bad. So that's kind of how the false papacy was set up. And at one point, Uthorian and the you could call him the false pope or the anti-pope, which is interesting because originally anti doesn't necessarily mean opposite. It kind of means in replacement of. So the replacement pope was him and Uthorian both kind of invaded the same cosm at the same time and recognize each other being High Lords, and where in another situation the High Lords might fight each other for that cosm and the possibility, Uthorian and false Pope Jean Malraux I, I'll just call him Malraux from here on out, unless I want to, for whatever reason, make it longer, but Malraux and Uthorian kind of saw each other and they were like, we have the same tech, we have the same social, yes, our spirit and our magic axioms are different, and you're a high fantasy, I'm a Christian-ish reality, that part's different. But they would have like games, I guess, that they would do where they would both invade a realm, a cosm, and they would set up each other as one being a good person and one being a bad person, and make the populace decide, and then the populace accepted both of them, and they kind of worked together on quite a few conquering other cosms and kind of splitting the possibilities between the darkness device. Now, the false Pope, he basically grew up through a Catholic-like world cosm that was a flat disk. They believed the flat world, that the planets went around it, etc., called Magna Verita, or Great Truth. And I pronounce things more of the classical Latin, so I guess Church Latin, actually, it would be more of Magna Verita. But Great Truth is the name of that cosm, that Earth, that flat disk Earth. And basically he grew up in kind of the Catholic type church, and on that world, when there was the schism between the popes, not later than the schism that broke off the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church, but one within the Catholic Church, where there at various times would be two or even more popes, and one of them basically was a pope in Rome, and one was a pope in France. And in our reality on Earth, the Pope of Rome eventually won. But in that reality, the Pope of France won. So he became the leader of that Catholic Church. And the darkness device, when it was found by the false Pope Malraux, it basically is a form of a ebony cross, Ebenskrux, black cross. And basically, it basically told the Pope that it was kind of like from God, and the Pope is sorry, I keep saying Pope, but I mean the false Pope Malraux kind of believed that, or at least wanted to believe it so much that any doubts he had, he kind of forced out of his head. So what happened is, again, he finds Uthorian, they do some conquests, and then when the Gaunt Man was figuring out which High Lords to bring in, he had Uthorian, who I said he was basically a buffoon lackey, and that's the part that I don't like, because when it's talking about Malraux and Uthorian working together, it presents Uthorian as kind of, a person who could play chess, who with cosm on a reality based scale, and who had conquered and had learned about reality, and then they kind of just threw all that backstory at some point completely away and turned him into a big buffoon. But at the beginning, him and Malraux worked together. He was kind of the lieutenant or previous lieutenant of the Gaunt Man, and when the Gaunt Man brought him in, then Malraux is linked through Ithorian, so he brings Malraux in. And they even had a kind of what the false pope would do is, like I said, he would bring basically agents who would say, you know, tech is bad, and then when he landed, it did an axiom wash, it knocked all the tech out. Demons and witchcraft, he would kind of allow to happen, to be able to point fingers at them and say, this is bad, and, you know, my church will help, you know, defeat the demons and stuff like that. So he is coming down the Maelstrom Bridge to make a big announcement, and this is the backstory. And one of the in the novelization, one of the main characters, she is from a tech world, and she kind of puts her memories on a little chip, and it injects him, I believe it's in the neck, like the spinal cord area, and gives him all these visions of tech. And one of the things that's in original Torg is cybernetics had two ways to work. You could either wire your nervous system up to be able to accept cyberware, or there was another thing, and it was kind of a some type of liquid known as jazz, and the jazz would kind of manipulate your nervous system and made it accept cyberware and stuff. So she hit him with a little jazz packet connected to this like little thing injection, and it gave him these memories, these kind of false memories of her home cosm, which was very high tech with cybernetics and such. And it kind of knocked his conscious out. He was seeing what was going on, but he had no control of it. And his darkness device was linked and was getting all these images of high tech, but it didn't understand that he wasn't the one communicating it, because these flashes were going in his mind. So the darkness device thought that he wanted high tech, and it put a ton of possibility energy that it was taking from the population. It landed in France and in the area of like Spain and down kind of towards Italy. So that Western Europe area under Isle was the United Kingdom and up through Scandinavia. So it sent this new axiom type adjustment, and it boosted it up to 26. So it went from 15 to 26. It went from primitive or lesser firearms, swords, and plate mail, and it jumped all the way up to cybernetics. And it wasn't what he wanted, but he was able to adjust, because it would have taken just at least an equal amount of possibility energy to bring that back down, and would be completely wasted. He figured out he would kind of he would kind of go along with it, and he found out a way by saying that the cybernetics were holy, and it was based kind of upon sins of the flesh. So if your flesh is sinful, then you get rid of your flesh and you put on holy cyberware. So he kind of did that. So it's a basically the two genres you have is kind of like a similar to the Catholic, and I'm not saying it's Catholic by any means. Like I said, it went back to where this schism happened, and the false pope from the French pope gained power. So during that whole time, things had shifted. Plus, then you have this pope who has a darkness device who's influencing him and such. So it veers way off from Catholic teachings. but it has kind of those trappings where you have cardinals and you have the mitre hats and all the trappings of the church, and it had Hospitallers and Templars, but then they became cybernetic versions and such. So basically that kind of happened, and he's going along with this is all the sins of the flesh. So accept my holy, the holy sacred cyberware. So that's kind of where he's going with it. And one of the things that it made, and this is something that it was kind of even pre what we would know as the internet, you really couldn't jump on Google Chrome or even Internet Explorer, or if you go way back, Netscape Navigator. There was none of that stuff really going on at the time that these came out, but you did have internet type connections directly to different computers or very primitive internet-ish type things. You would type in addresses that you wanted to go to. Like, there was a lot of MUDs I played. It was like /telnet and then some number code, and then that would link you up to a MUD and you would play like text-based World of Warcraft and stuff like that. So that really dates me, but that was kind of the things going on around that time. But they took that and they made a Godnet. So there was kind of a Godnet, and it went along with the cyberpunk theme. So you have a Catholic-ish church put on top of a cyberpunk theme, or the other way. You had this false papacy that had this cyberpunk thing smashed into it. So like I said, a lot of the cosms were two or more genres kind of pushed together and kind of thought, how is this gonna how is this gonna work? So there's hover tanks, and your mind can go into the Godnet, which was their internet, which was kind of like net running, and Cyberpunk or Shadowrun, or any type of that early late or mid to late 80s, early 90s cyberpunkish type genre. You kind of had that with the cyberpapacy. Now, one thing that a lot of people still they'll disagree with me, which is fine, but I never personally had a problem with it. They have the whole what you'd call the decker problem, or the netrunner problem, where if you had something that needed to be done in the net, and we'll talk about Godnet because we're talking about Torg, that when the netrunner goes in and does these net run, the rest of the party kind of sits around and does nothing. It's splitting the party. And one of the things that the book describes, and what I always use, is if somebody's just going to get some piece of information or do something, just have them do a couple of rolls. That's really not needed. Now, if it's something dramatic, then the whole scene should be something dramatic. So while your netrunner is going and doing these things, and the mechanics, I'll talk about how you flip cards for initiative and things, then the rest of the party could maybe be outside, but they're fighting off church police that are coming, Hospitallers that are coming, cyber priests that are coming after them. They're doing stuff outside the net. At the same time, the netrunner is doing stuff inside the net. Yes, they're separate, but rounds are going in the same order in the same amount of time. So they just take their turn like they would take their turn normally. And you just deal with it like that. The other option that they had was they had what were called temp trods, which in the new Cyberpunk 2077 that's out, they would call them like similar to the BD wreaths, the brain dance wreaths, where you hook them up, they were kind of on your head, and they would link you to the Godnet, so you could go in that way. You didn't have to have a deck, a cyber deck. Now the cyber decks helped, and they had programs and stuff like that made it much easier, but you could go in with the temp trods. So that's always an option too. So I personally never had a problem, and none of my players had problems. The netrunner could get firearm skills and stuff like that, so that they could participate outside of the net, so they weren't just a one-trick pony and stuff like that. So I had both players that were net runners that did other things, and players that had characters that were other things and did net running. So I don't know, I just never had a problem, but I know other people do. But there's various solutions for that, and they actually had, and I'll have to do that kind of diagonal thing, but here we kind of, is it gonna, Godnet. So kind of some special effects, but the Godnet, they actually had a supplement book that broke things down into cyberdecks and programs for the cyberdecks and how to navigate through the Godnet, and they had diagrams and showed game masters examples of how to put these together. So when you're doing a Godnet run, you could you use this, and I thought it worked brilliant. I thought it was very good on how they did things. I also really like how they did not date the material. When I talk about Pan Pacifica, Nippon Tech, which became Pan Pacifica and Torg Eternity, when I talk about that, they dated themselves. They put things like megabytes and 64-bit and things like that were at 1990 were high tech, but in our age now, it's ancient history. So it really dated. Now in the Cyberpapacy, they didn't. In the Cyberpapacy, they actually called them, they called different things like blocks. So when you had like RAM or gigabytes or terabytes or whatever we'll be calling things in 10, 20 years, they just called them blocks. So it didn't have a real world equivalent. It wasn't like blockchains or anything. It was like no real world equivalent. So it was easy to understand a basic premise. They weren't talking about hundreds of blocks, like 5, 10 was very, very, very high. So you had a limited amount of things you did, and it really didn't matter because these programs were meant for certain things. They weren't like apps or playing video games or something on the Godnet that you just did. You didn't have to have a deck. You just jack in through a port, but you could use these decks to help you do things within the Godnet. There were cyberware, so you could have limbs and arms and legs, replace lungs, nose things, eyes for different senses and stuff. You had skill chips that you could put in, and the Cyberpapacy skill chips were able to boost your own ads. When we get to a different realm that has skill chips, they did it a different way. But these skills could add 1 or 2, and I think 3 might have been the very highest that they could go, but they could add to your skills 1, 2, or 3 points, which was always nice. But one of the downsides in original Torg is each piece of cybernetic that you put in gave you a cyber value rating, and then if you're ever set back, if you ever had a setback in the game, you had to make a cyber psychosis roll. And if you did bad, it could mess around with your cybernetics. It might have even gone as far as killing you or hampering you really bad for a long time. But if you did really well on it, you could actually lower your cyber value. You kind of got adjusted to it. Nothing could go below a 1. But you could do different things. So depending on the cyber psychosis, there was a few things that could benefit you, a few things that just kind of messed with you a little bit, and then some things that really messed with you bad. And in Torg Eternity also, when you had this, not Torg Eternity, sorry, when in original Torg, when you had your cybernetics put in, then you got wounded with a non-healable wound, and it took time to heal up. So that was kind of a downside of getting new cyberware and kind of things that balance out, because you could just buy it if you had the money and you had you had a place that you could have it done, then you could get it. There was that whole resistance type thing, so not everybody went for the cyberpope religion, cyberpapacy, and stuff like that. But the big things there were you could have the cybernetics. It did have possibility you could have cyber psychosis. You could do the net running thing, which were usually decks. They had various decks, various sizes. They were usually, say, the size of an old keyboard. I always imagined them. They had cartridges, kind of things that they showed that could be placed in them that had the different programs and blocks and stuff. But then they had other ones. Usually, since your brain, your soul, kind of went into it, that you were able to. You didn't need screens or anything, but they had one that actually had a screen, so people outside could see what the netrunner was doing, kind of in real time. So just various things like that that made cyberpapacy like unique to the cyberpunk genre, because it had this whole theology layer above it. This, similar to the Catholic Church type thing. So you'd have cathedrals and monasteries and things like that that held the information, because the social didn't go up higher, so it stayed at 18. So you had this tech of 26, but the social was 18. So the social, if Core Earth is 23, it's a decent amount less than our own social. So things weren't like capitalistic. You had the church is the one that did all the manufacturers, or at least sent it out to guilds to do the manufacturing of all the cyberware and things like that. Information in databases, there wasn't a cloud. The church is not going to trust lots of different, things. No, peer-to-peer, that's kind of what would be even maybe resistance. People had that, but they would keep that data and store it in physical locations of monasteries and cathedrals and things like that, churches, depending on what things were. So sometimes you had to either enter through the Godnet or physically into a church, and then use your net runner once you got inside of a church or cathedral or monastery, etc., and do stuff. So there is a lot of possibilities of adventures that you could have. A lot of tropes were made cybernetics, like the gargoyles on the cathedrals. You'd have cygoyles, or since it was a somewhat magic realm, you could have magic type things. At one point, there was some crossover with Isle and the cyberpapacy, so you could have like cybernetic dragons and stuff like that along the English Channel. So this is just for me, it was a really fun realm, and I personally thought it was very well done in the fact that they didn't date themselves. They didn't try to put real world terms of megabytes or gigabytes or terabytes. They just made their own concept with that. I don't know. Maybe it was taken off of something from like Shadowrun or Cyberpunk. I played those a few times, but I didn't ever get really into it. But if they did, I'm glad they kept it, and I'm glad they didn't go with real world terms, because anytime you put real world terms into a game, sooner or later it's going to be dated. Even if you think, wow, this is not going to happen for 20, 30 years, if that game is still around in 20, 30 years, whatever you predicted for the future is probably not going to be what happened. And then you have to say, oh, was this an alternate reality? In Torg, at least you could say it was an alternate cosmverse. And so what was true then is true. But when you're dealing with your own cosmverse, if you've made it as it's near now, it is modern time, then you throw out something like a Nintendo 64-bit and has future tech, it's kind of laughable. But that's kind of where the Storm Knights and Malraux were able to come from. The Storm Knights, you could have, any type of cyber or priest or Knight Templar, Hospitalers. There was a whole range of things that you could go. They even had because this was made in the 90s, so you'd have like old World War II veterans who have got kind of cybernetic, and they remember, because it's taking place in France, they remember the Germany, the World War II. They kind of have those feelings of this person coming in and trying to take over Europe again. You had a fight with the actual Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church and the Core Earth Pope, he doesn't want another Pope. He doesn't care that person's saying, I'm the Cyber Pope. It's a conflict with him and his religion, because the Cyber Pope's trying to say, look, I'm the real Catholic Church. I'm we understand sins of the flesh and cyberware, and look, we're high tech and things like that. So yeah, he was able to take that false papacy and flip it really fast. Well, one day it's like tech is bad, and the next day it's like, well, tech is holy, but only if it's sanctioned through the church and stuff like that. So that we're right at 30 minutes. So I think that's pretty good for a realm. But it's going to be a little longer because we went through the axioms, but we didn't go through world laws. So they had the law of ordeal, which were things that you could do, ordeal of fighting, or all, like the dunking of witches and etc. And basically, there is ways to prove your innocence. So that was kind of part of it. There was the one true way, which makes it so that any religions coming into the cyberpapacy reality had a difficult time that caused contradictions. And then you had the law of heretical magic, which is they said that they didn't like magic, but they used the fact that there were witches and demons and stuff. Like I said, they could come down and witches casting spells and doing bad things, and demons coming and disrupting, and they could be the reason why you need the cyber church, because we'll protect you from the witches and demons. So the law of heretical magic is that you could get a boost. Magic users could get a boost to their rolls. So when they rolled, their spells could be easier to do and more powerful. But if you failed, then it was the devil takes his due, and it could really mess you up. I believe it was a more powerful backlash to it, so it could really mess you up that way. So those were the world laws. And again, the world laws went with you in original Torg. So if you were that cyber witch, then if you went to other realms, you could invoke that law of heretical magic and boost your spells, but at the downside of possibly hurting yourselves. So the cyber papacy ended up super high tech, decent magic, pretty decent spirit, and okay social. And it was just really controlled cyberpunk smashed onto the Catholic Church that had was the schism of the Catholic Church that France had won. So it wasn't our Catholic Church that had cyberpunk slammed onto it. It was a different one. So that's one of the things that one of the realms that invaded. Like I said, Uthorian and Malraux kind of had a little bromance going on. And the other thing is the Cyberpope didn't expand very much. He was very defensive. Plus, a lot of the energy that he had that would have allowed him to expand was used when his axioms of his reality went from that 15 up to that 26. So a lot of the energy was spent doing that. So once again, I am Lehman Crafton, aka Zorvalachan, Less Than Guru. If you like this video, you can hit the like. If you dislike it, you can hit that dislike. If you want to get my content as it comes out, you can hit the little subscription and make sure that you watch these videos. And again, if you like the new format, let me know. If it's too bad, let me know. if you don't like it. And I just figured I would try to do something so you wouldn't have the same couch and Christmas tree showing up. So thanks again, and until next time, bye.